for another Flex Time review. In today's hybrid psychology history lesson, we will be getting a little medieval as we discuss the dark yet very interesting history of the treatment of those with mental illnesses. In the description box, you can find a link to a worksheet that goes along with the video if you'd like to get everything down on paper. Our journey will begin in one of my favorite historic locations, and one we have virtually traveled to on multiple occasions, ancient Greece. Let's get started. So here we are in ancient Greece, circa 400 BC, where we will start our history lesson on the treatment of mental illness. Now, before we get started, it is important to note that evidence of treatment can be traced all the way back to ancient times, where our ancestors would drill holes into each other's heads to rid evil spirits in an act known as trephining. But for the sake of our lesson, we are going to start right here in ancient Greece. I actually have a connection here. So let's head on over to the marketplace and look for him. Here we are in a Greek agora, a place for citizens to buy and sell goods as well as socialize. Right over here we have my buddy Hippocrates. Sup, Hip? How we doing, man?
Doing good, Stead. Been a while. How we doing?
Doing good, man. I actually got a couple of AP Psych kids here with me.
Oh boy, didn't see the group there, huh? How are we doing, AP Psych kids?
Yeah, they don't really talk much. Anyways, we're learning about the history of mental health treatment, and I was wondering if you could teach us a little bit about how you Grecian citizens view mental health.
Sure. Let's get started. Now, not to toot my own horn or anything, but believe it or not, I am actually the one credited with rejecting the idea of demonic possession by stating that mental disorders are going to be similar to physical disorders and have natural causes. It is my theory that diseases of the mind are a result of the imbalance of the four humors of the body, which are going to be the blood in our hearts, black bile in our spleen, yellow bile in our liver, and the phlegm in our brains. My research has actually shown that an excess of yellow bile may cause mania, and too much black bile can cause depression. Due to these physiological changes in the body, I propose that mental disorders should be treated as any other disorder. Anyways, that's the gist of it. Back to your teacher.
Appreciate it, Hip. I'll catch you later. Alright, so we're probably going to need this stuff for our next location, medieval Europe. Here we are in medieval Europe, where all of our progress made during the time of the Greeks and Romans was quickly erased. Aww. With the fall of the Roman Empire, the Roman Catholic Church quickly gained power, holding a heavy influence over all of Europe. And as a result, mental illness was yet again explained as possession, with treatment involving things such as exorcism, bloodletting, and in extreme cases, putting people to death. Now, luckily for Europeans, in a few hundred years they will experience the Renaissance and see a rebirth of classical Greek and Roman culture, which will include better treatment for the mentally ill. Unfortunately though, the Middle Ages did set the bar extremely low for how they treat their mentally ill, because even during the Renaissance, as asylums for the mentally ill started to fill up, conditions declined, with patients being treated as prisoners, as they were oftentimes chained up and sometimes even used as tourist attractions. Aww. Now let's fast forward to the 19th century United States. So here we are in the US. Over here we have the father of American psychiatry, Benjamin Rush, who was one of the first of his time to advocate for the humane treatment of the mentally ill. Even though he is considered to be the father of American psychiatry, he did still have some pretty interesting treatments. One being the tranquilizing chair, which was supposed to control blood flow to the brain by stopping movement and some sensory input. Rush thought that this would prove effective because the theory at the time was that mental illness was a result of inflammation of the brain from too much blood flow. During this time, we do start to see some improvement with our treatment of the mentally ill, as asylums start to become habitable places where those with mental illness could actually go to and recover. It was recognized at the time that a facility that operated with less than 200 patients was the most effective, which caused the number of asylums to greatly increase. As a result of this increase, asylums started to experience funding and staffing issues. Even with these new improvements in how we treat the mentally ill, we still face some issues. As immigrants started to flood the US in record numbers, asylums started to yet again become overrun. And with the prejudice immigrants faced, they were not treated fairly. In the mid-1800s, Dorothy Dix was teaching Sunday school to prisoners in a New England asylum, where she observed the horrendous conditions of the asylums and decided that she needed to do something about it. From 1841 to 1881, Dix motivated both people and lawmakers to do something about the injustices those faced in asylums, and raised enough money to build over 30 modern mental health hospitals, and even raised money to help improve others. Throughout the 20th and 21st century, we see the rise of the biological and psychological approaches to treating mental illness, with electric shock therapy and psychotropic medication both being introduced in the 1900s. Even though psychotropic medicine has been proven very effective, it did come with some negative side effects. No pun intended. That negative side effect being deinstitutionalization, which we saw occur in the 1950s, which was just when the federal government moved mental health patients out of state-run asylums into federally funded community mental health centers, which are not always ran the most effectively and have led to an increase of homelessness amongst those with mental illnesses. We are also going to see a rise in popularity with those studying psychology as a result of the workings of prominent individuals such as Sigmund Freud, who thought he could help those with mental illnesses through the talking cure. As mentioned earlier, today, our major two methods of treating mental illness is through biomedical treatment and psychotherapy. These two types of treatment follow along with our modern perspectives of psychology, as each perspective views treatment of patients with mental disorders in a different light. Those who follow the biological perspective of psychology believe that the cause of mental disorders is the result of an imbalance of brain chemicals and think that the best way to treat those mental disorders is through the use of psychotropic medications and, in rare occasions, electroconvulsive therapy. Therapists who follow in Freud's footsteps and practice the psychodynamic perspective believe that the root cause of all mental illnesses are our conflicting unconscious thoughts as well as our childhood experiences. Psychodynamic therapists attempt to help clients find patterns in their emotions, thoughts, and beliefs in order to gain insight into their behaviors. These therapists use several psychoanalytical techniques such as dream interpretation and free association. Humanistic psychologists believe that the cause of mental issues is a lack of self-fulfillment in oneself. Humanistic therapists use client-centered therapy, referring to individuals as clients rather than patients and focusing on promoting future growth rather than diving into the past. Bringing the research of John Watson and B.F. Skinner into the field of clinical psychology, behavioral therapists believe that psychological issues are the result of a learned behavior. Behavior therapy applies the learning principles of classical and operant conditioning in order to treat maladaptive actions. And the next modern form of therapy we are going to touch upon, and probably the most widely practiced in the field of clinical psychology, cognitive therapy. Cognitive therapists are going to focus on an individual's way of thinking while evaluating mental health issues. A cognitive therapist is going to attempt to teach people new, more adaptive ways of thinking and acting, believing that thoughts intervene between events and our emotional reactions. Now, I think that we can all agree that we much rather be treated by today's standards than any other time in history. And for one last time, there is always someone who has to mess that up. Aww. Between the 1930s and the 1960s, Walter Freeman, an American physician, toured the country, shocking people unconscious, then hammering a tool known as an orbitoclast into the patient's eye socket directly into their frontal lobe, believing that cutting the frontal lobe nerves would stabilize mood and personality issues in a terrifying procedure known as the transorbital lobotomy. All in all, Freeman performed transorbital lobotomies on roughly 25,000 patients in 23 states until his final procedure in 1967, where Freeman's patient died 3 days post-surgery. Freeman charged $25 for the procedure, and his patients often had to be retaught how to eat and use the bathroom. And not to mention, relapses were very common, and once you had the lobotomy, there was no going back. Well, I'm glad we could end this lesson on a happy note. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please feel free to like and subscribe. It is always appreciated and will keep you up to date with